Welcome to Dear Marketers, produced by MKT1 and Caspian Studios in partnership with Typeform. This is a show where me and some of my closest marketing friends answer questions from you. I have my friends, Jenny and Devin, back for another episode. Jenny is the head of content at Vanta. Devin is the head of product marketing and partnerships, and there's probably more, it's a very long title, at Mercury. Neither Devin or Jenny are LinkedIn influencers, that's one word, themselves yet. But I think after this episode, they will be, which we're talking about becoming LinkedIn influencers. And so I think with all of the tips in here, in about 2 days, they will be at 100,000 followers for sure. Let's go to Typeform for today's question.
Dear marketers, I'm Claire. I run the business operations and marketing teams at Metronome. We're a usage-based billing platform, and we just raised a Series C. We think SaaS software is all moving to usage, and we want to make sure the market knows that and knows how we're thinking about it. With that, I'm curious for your perspective on investing in our founder's brand on LinkedIn. There's a ton of effort that would have to go behind that, not only from marketing, but also from our CEO. I wonder how you think about prioritizing that versus other efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire, by the way. Great question. Seems very timely for you all. I know you recently raised your Series C. So congrats to Metronome on that as well. How do you feel about this question?
I feel triggered because this is a question.
Yeah. I led this with a therapy type question because it felt like I might need to, honestly, I'm really in tune. So I figure you might need to talk about your feelings.
Yes, I've gotten this question a lot as head of content at probably every company I've worked at some point. And so, yes, I feel triggered. And I think my hot take answer as to whether your startup needs a LinkedIn influencer or whether your founder needs to be on LinkedIn is that it really depends. And I know this is very Libra of me to be like, yes or no.
Is that very Libra? Devin, do you know? I'm not sure.
They're balancing the scales, right? That's all I know.
Yeah, and
about
I'm
Libra,
Devin's like go-to astrologer.
They waffle.
So like I would know.
I know, but I definitely am not an astrologist, so I was at least hoping someone could verify. Because otherwise, you could just say throughout this podcast, that's so Libra of me, that's so Sagittarius of you, Kramer, and I would have no way to fact check. All right, where were we? Hot takes.
Yes, my hot take answer is that it depends. So I would say yes, you should have a LinkedIn influencer from your startup. If you have a clear goal or objective in mind for what this is going to serve, you have a unique point of view to share with your audience, and you're willing to commit to this, for the long haul because it's not a one and done type of program. The flip side is no, you should not do it if you can't answer those questions. Like you don't have a goal, you don't have a clear point of view to share with your audience. You can't commit. And this is like purely a vanity project. Like, don't do it.
Yep. Great advice. And we'll get more into that. Devin, how does this make you feel? And any hot takes off the top here?
Similar take. And I'm trying to think about why it makes us feel so triggered. And I think
Me too.
It's sort of just like anything else though, right? Where like someone comes to you as a marketer with an idea because they like see other people doing it, or they're like, shouldn't we do a Super Bowl commercial, a billboard? Shouldn't like our CEO become an influencer? And just like anything else, it like if there is a clear goal and if you have like good message audience channel fit, then yes, but don't just do it because everyone else is doing it. And I think that what makes us feel triggered is we often, as marketers, get approached for this type of thing without clear goals, without clear
or without
expertise.
a clear expectation for the fact that it takes a long time. Like, let me tell you, it takes a long time to build on LinkedIn. And like, I'm coming off a week where my LinkedIn stuff just wasn't working. Like I was doing all sorts of things. I was doing the things I normally do, and it was not hitting. Like impressions were about a quarter of what they normally are. And I don't know why. And I feel pretty down on the whole channel and want to just give it up.
The
right. So
it's
not easy.
I'm shocked.
Yeah. I posted about Clueless.
I mean,
by the time this comes out, it'll be a couple weeks ago. And I thought it was going to fly off the shelves, but it didn't. But it takes a lot of time and it is hard. And like things like PR, which are wildly unpredictable and you're kind of at the whim of others. It's so much like that. Like you're at the whim. It's not like paid where you can kind of control what goes out, or even like email where you know who's on the list. Like it's difficult to predict, and you can spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to crack the code. But at the end of the day, it's time and authenticity that are going to win the day. But anyway, so Jenny, you already said that you've been asked this question by a founder or an exec. Devin, have you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've been at different companies at different stages. So in some cases, there already is, an exec sort of thought leader with an existing audience and sort of strategy around this. And in some cases, yeah, it comes up as like, should we do this thing? And sometimes it feels more forced than others. And again, I think you evaluate it with the same kinds of frameworks that you would evaluate any other marketing program or strategy.
I think it's important to note that a lot of this is new. It very much used to be that the company brand was the one building up the social following. And maybe your founder had a presence on something like Twitter, back when it was called Twitter. I haven't been on it since then. Recently, this question comes up almost all the time, and it feels like you have to do this, I think, in a lot of situations. So I'm curious to get to the bottom of that as well.
Because every marketer has been asked to make something viral, right? And
make it go viral.
You used to actually be able to make things go viral from company handles, and now that's just harder and harder to do. So we're looking to individuals to like, quote unquote, go viral. And I think that's where a lot of this stems from as well.
Let's go viral. And there's so many expectations you have to set, like I just said, with your founder. Like things could be really going really well and they could have this viral hit, and then it can take a really long time to get one again, and they can be like, well, what's happened here? And the truth is the algorithm happened probably. Thanks to our partner Typeform, which has been my go-to form builder for years. We use it at MarketOne and Dear Marketers. And of course, if you need to submit a question for us to answer here on Dear Marketers, we have a Typeform for that. It's branded. It's not a dull traditional form. You can find the link to that form in the show notes. You can also use Typeform at your company too. Use it to collect leads, gather feedback, and do research. There are templates to help you get started. They have video forms, and you can use code MKT1 to get 20% off their annual growth plan. We've already covered a lot of things in our popcorn segment, but I guess based on this, I'm seeing three things. I think there's how to determine if this is a good idea for your founder, how to like avoid groupthink and really think, is this the right thing for us? Next up is how to manage this process. It's hard to manage a founder on most things, but especially on something like posting regularly on social and engaging with it. So let's talk about that. Let's start with the concrete example that Claire gave us, which is that Claire is leading marketing at Metronome right now, working with their founder who has about 5,000 followers, is what I looked up. He's starting to post. He does post. He seems like he has interesting things to say. So given this, I think that's a great start. Like that's an indicator to me. There's been a start kind of on their own. There's a base level of followers. He has credibility in the world of pricing and billing, which is what Metronome does based on previous experiences. He's been in tech for a long time, so he knows a bunch of people. They have really amazing investors that I think, and connections to other founders from what I'm seeing. And so I think due to all of that, he definitely has an influence already, I would imagine, and people around him who have influences already. So I think that's a great place to start. Any other things that stand out to you about the Metronome questions in particular? Like, should they do this?
Yeah, no, I think they have a lot of great raw ingredients to work with, if you will. And so I think to determine whether to continue on this path, I would use a couple of different frameworks here. So first, let's
Battle of the frameworks. Of the frameworks.
Yes. I would say first and foremost, take those raw ingredients and really try to, formulate an actual, strategy for this. Like use GACs, like align on the goals, be really clear about the audience you're trying to reach, understand the channel requirements, really be clear about who the stakeholders are, besides the founder and whoever in marketing is helping them manage this.
So let me stop you there. Yeah. When you say who the stakeholders are, I think you're saying it's not going to be possible for your founder to do this themselves. They're going to need to have help.
Yeah,
and so part of that is checking, like, do you have the resources to support the founder in these efforts? Yep. Some founders, maybe the most prolific that you see, like it used to be like back in the Twitter days a while ago, it was like Aaron Levy from Box was doing this. And I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure that was just him. You have, there's a company in the go-to-market tech space called RB2B, and he is on LinkedIn all the time. And it's like very clickbaity, but it tends to work for them. And I think that's him. Adam Robinson, I think is his name. I think that's him for sure. And so there's edge cases where it's the person, but I think more likely than not, especially to have a message that ladders up to your overall story and things like that, there are other people involved. So do you have the resources to do that? Because it's going to take time. It's not a quick thing. All right, I'll let you get back to it. So you were saying like, make sure, come up with kind of the overall brief for this. Like, what are your goals? Who's your audience here? What are you trying to say? All of that stuff. What else?
Yeah, you kind of touched on this a little bit just now about, making sure whatever you're doing on LinkedIn, it, ladders up to your overall story. So it also make sure that you're clear on your perceptions. So,
remind us what perceptions are in case people just forgot to listen to episode 2. I'm not sure how that would have been possible, but if you didn't listen to episode 2, which you should listen to, it was episode 2, right? I think it was.
Yes.
Yeah, it was. I'm just joking. I remember all of them in detail. Every word that was said. I do know that in every episode, we've either mentioned Taco Bell or milk or both so far, and we are not going to let that stop, in case you were wondering.
Oh, I was planning to talk about milk for sure.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about milk every time. All right, so episode 2, we talked about perceptions. Perceptions are what you use to define your story. You write 3 or 4 of these statements in the perspective of your audience on what story you're trying to tell. And then you use those to make sure all content ladders up to it. So you're saying that if your executive or founder is going to be on LinkedIn, should their story ladder up to those exact same perceptions? Or how do you kind of put those 2 frameworks together here?
Yeah, I mean, I think in this case, you would probably have some sort of, perception in place that's trying to capture an industry insight or shift that your company is trying to lead. And then from there, I usually like to unpack each perception a little bit further and tease out more specific themes for that specific pillar. So I think in this case, there's probably an industry trend that you want your founder to be, speaking about.
By in this case, you mean for Metronome, there's an industry trend. So we didn't really touch on this, but the other thing that Metronome has going for them specifically is that there's this industry trend. There's a shift from subscription-based pricing to usage-based pricing, especially amongst AI companies. And that's not what this podcast is about, but it is about the fact that you need something great to write about that is going to resonate on LinkedIn or whatever platform you're using to try to make your founder a thought leader. And there are certain topics that do really well, and trends and shifts and things and shifts in the space tend to do well. It's actually very similar to how you would have approached PR in the past. It's really hard to get to do PR in a space where there's no trends or interesting things happening, and it's just like really off. And so, but if you do align with a trend, it might make sense to spend time there. So there's 2 things going for Metronome here. There's this seeming like founder interest in doing this, has things to say, has some followers to start from, isn't starting from 500 here. And then, which is fine. You can start from 500, but it's going to be harder. And then also there's a story being told right now in the market that they can capture and talk about and share more about that people are interested in.
Yep.
There's like supply and demand, right? The founder has a supply of ideas and expertise and has energy around it. And then there's demand in the market for content on this topic that he's an expert on.
That's embarrassing because I was the econ major.
I didn't even go to business school, Kramer. But look at me.
Shit. Supply and demand in it all day. So for Metronome, they had the supply and they have the demand. They have the supply of the right thoughts, the things that are going to work on this channel. You could also call that like channel fit. And they have already some audience and some pull for that audience or sort of demand for these things. And so that's coming together. What else to help you determine if it makes sense for your founder or executive to be an influencer, specifically on LinkedIn?
I think that the person's actual desire to do it is more important than you might think. Yes, you can have marketing help and you can sort of prod the person and try to tee them up with topics and all of that. But if they are just not that into it, then like maybe try to find someone else in the company. It doesn't have to be your CEO or founder. It doesn't even have to be an exec, actually. And maybe what it really should be is the person who knows the most about the topic that you really want to talk about and get eyeballs on. So I do think like the want of the person who is going to be the face of this initiative is a pretty important criteria.
So yeah, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink.
You
And
can't
I
make
think
them post on LinkedIn.
you can lead a horse to LinkedIn, but you can't make them post.
Correct.
Your founder is the horse in this case, in case you're wondering. Yeah, I think that's true. And I think that's really important. And I think this is true with a lot of things working with founders. Like you might be like, oh, we have so many speaking opportunities and it's so much easier to just, or so much more cost effective to just go speak at a conference, and we're getting these invites versus to sponsor them and pay. But my founder hates speaking on stage, and you can see it and you can feel it. And I mean, we've seen this a little bit with a founder that we've worked with that had some fame, if you will, some tech fame, and just really didn't want to be in the spotlight. And you have to respect that, right? You have to say, okay, like that's something that we can't necessarily take advantage of right now, but let's figure out another path, and let's maybe make the other founder be the one with the bigger personal brand. And so there's two situations here that we're really talking about. We're talking about the situation where founders and executives often ask you to be a thought leader, but then on the flip side, marketers sometimes want to force their founders and executives to be thought leaders. And the forcing doesn't work. And just because your founders asked you if they should do it doesn't work. And so you need to find that like happy medium where the founder kind of wants to do it and you feel like you have the resources and it makes sense. And so there needs to be that magic combination of enough interest to make it work, plus the resources to make it work, plus the actual things to say. So all of those things I think need to be true to make this a worthwhile venture, or a worthwhile initiative, I should say.
Yeah. So Kramer, going back to like why I think marketers get asked this more, and maybe we ask or push our founders and exec team more on this. Yeah. I'm curious, what else do you think has contributed to that, other than just like the social algorithms changing a little bit and company handles being harder to leverage? Like, I feel like there's these other trends in marketing that you've talked about before that are kind of leading to this as well, right?
Yeah. I've been talking a lot about in like newsletters and other avenues. So you've got organic inbound declining, search declining. You've got outbound kind of not working as well, even though it's easier, because that's part of the problem. It gets easier, everybody does it, and then it's harder to make it work, even if you're doing a great job. And so what's going to replace this? Like, what do you do now? And I think I've mentioned that there's a couple of things I think you do now. One is I think you lean on your ecosystem. So you lean on third parties to help you grow. So what the hell does this have to do with making your founder a LinkedIn influencer? Well, everything. Because part of making them a LinkedIn influencer is actually having them have conversations with other people in their space. That's a great way to kickstart some of the ecosystem stuff. Just for the founder to have casual conversations, have them recorded, whether that's a webinar or a podcast. It's a really great way to activate a very organic, natural seeming social strategy. And that's what people want. That's why the company handles aren't doing as well, because people now want personal, it to feel personal and authentic. And so, having an executive or founder that is active on LinkedIn and is communicating with other people and using their ecosystem to then help them grow faster on LinkedIn and also help pull people in and leverage the distribution networks of others, I think is just a viable strategy right now that's working when we're seeing a lot of other things not working.
Very tied, I think, to the ecosystem and sort of community strategy, right? You're really trying to just tap into that community, activate that community, kind of like insert your story and drive perceptions in that community. And so again, I think it's great to do it via a founder, but if you don't have that opportunity for whatever reason, there's not a kind of a strategic fit there. Yeah, I think engaging customers and influencers and other folks who do have followings and are kind of willing to talk about you on these channels is also a viable strategy here. Because ultimately, if you think about the metric you're trying to move, it's a top of funnel kind of brand awareness and affinity and sort of, creating these perceptions that you want to drive in the market. So again, I think don't feel constrained to just having to make your founder a LinkedIn influencer. First of all, it might not be LinkedIn. It might be some other channel for your company.
It might be, yeah. I mean, the main question was about LinkedIn here, but we're talking universally as well. Yeah.
So yeah, I think the two are very tied together for sure. Kind of ecosystem marketing in this. Yeah.
I would just add to that, having been on marketing teams where I was often tapped to be the ghostwriter for the founder, I've seen kind of a lot of the channel shifts over the last 10, 15 years.
Ooh, channel shift historian right here, Jenny Tai.
Yeah, so at the
Tell
end
us
of the
about
day,
it.
a lot of it is just go where your audience is. So my first tech job, I started off writing SEO articles and then got tapped by the PR team to ghostwrite bylines for the CTO and co-founder of the startup that they would then pitch to like tech blogs. And so that was where you would go to reach your audience back in 2010. I am dating myself a bit. And then you cut to like...
It's cool. You're not dating yourself. You're just showing the depth of your experience.
Of my expertise.
And how strong your memory is.
Yes, and I'm also an ex-historian, so I like zooming out.
It's true.
But yeah, then you cut to like 2015, 2016, and that was when it was really trendy to build your own publication for thought leadership. And so you would just tap into your existing subscriber base. But yeah, so that was the trend at the time. You build your own editorial publication, tap into your subscriber base, and share your thoughts that way. Around like cut to 2020, I'm working in MarTech at this point, and that was kind of really my first exposure to the world of LinkedIn influencers, because a lot of MarTech execs and founders were posting all the time on LinkedIn and had figured out how to really kind of take advantage of the algorithm. And so that's kind of, I feel like, the current trend we're still in, although I think it's evolving so fast that it's like, it shouldn't just be LinkedIn. It's just go where your audience is and where you're likely to be able to, find that audience content, fit with the people you're trying to reach.
Exactly. Yeah. And do the content formats that work best. And I just think we have so much access to, or it's so much easier to create assets in lots of different formats. So now we call that like repurposing, but really repurposing is just distributing things and making new assets for the specific channel and all of that stuff. Thanks to our partner, Framer. Framer is a no-code website builder for projects and startups of any size. Over the past few years, there have been huge leaps forward in the ease of designing, building, launching, and optimizing websites without needing developer help. This is great news for marketers, and Framer makes this process even easier, and it's overtaken Webflow as my favorite way to build sites, which is a huge deal if you've read my newsletters in the past. Framer looks and feels like a design tool and has a much lower learning curve, so marketers can build pages and launch sites really easily. Give it a try for your next landing page or migrate your whole site over to Framer. You won't look back. Use code MKT1 to get 25% off a basic, pro, startup, or scale-up yearly site. Let's be honest right now. I think that we're making a lot of good points about this, but I feel like maybe there's someone better who can give us a rubric for this. I don't have a framework for how you decide, or a framework for how to decide if your founder should be a LinkedIn influencer, but I know someone who might. So just totally off the cuff, would you guys be chill if I phoned a friend on this one? Can I phone him in, have a little chat, and then we can come back and regroup and kind of react?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm here with Peter Conforti. He is our expert for this episode. We had a few questions and couldn't think of anyone better than the founder of Good Content, which is an agency that works with founders and executives to help them increase their social presence, primarily on LinkedIn. So nobody better to chat with. And thank you so much for being here, Peter.
Of course. Thanks for having me, Emily.
When we were chatting, we were not stuck, but needed someone to weigh in on two things. The first thing is, how do you decide if this even makes sense for a founder or executive to do? And then second, I want to know the nuts and bolts of how you actually work with founders and executives to manage this process.
Yeah, totally. So, I mean, taking the first question of like, should you do this? Honestly, I think everyone should do this. I think everyone would benefit by having their executives more out on LinkedIn and talking all the time. I think the question is the extent to which you do it and whether you kind of go all in on it and see it really as a potential strong go-to-market motion. I think that there's a couple criteria that we look at to decide whether a prospect is kind of has the right criteria to do this really well. I mean, number one, the most obvious thing is like, is your ICP hanging out on LinkedIn?
Yeah, that's
obviously,
a good place
LinkedIn
to
is
start.
yeah, good place to start. Obviously, LinkedIn is chock full of salespeople, marketers, CEOs and founders, particularly in early stage, because they're basically salespeople and marketers for those companies, and a lot of HR professionals as well. So if you are a MarTech company, if you are selling into early stage startups, or if you're selling, some sort of HR tech, like generally those kinds of products tend to work really well for that audience. But we've seen success with lots of different kinds of audiences. Honestly, our best client right now is kind of deep tech observability client that sells into CTOs and VPs of engineering, which I didn't even think would be on LinkedIn, but here we are.
You never know.
You never know. And I mean, LinkedIn really is like the world's biggest kind of business conference at this point. So everybody is there at some point, and given your niche, you're going to be able to make some sort of contact with people, do some sort of networking. It's just a matter of the extent to which it's going to be really impactful for your business.
I think there's like pros and cons to your audience being there. I think to your point, it means that your audience is there, but it also means that everyone else is trying to use this as a strategy. So I think all the more reason, if you are targeting marketers or sales or early stage startups, much like with everything else in marketing or even building a product, you have to differentiate. And so where there's a bunch of people trying to do this, it's even harder. So I think, yes, it might be a smaller audience of people on LinkedIn in other roles, but there's probably less people trying to be influencers to that audience. So there's just different strategies, I think, too. To your point about the extent, it's also just different strategies, different things you'll say. The emphasis on differentiation is different, I would imagine.
100%. The sales and marketing space, or I should say catering to the sales and marketing audience, is now extremely competitive on LinkedIn. So while it is a pretty fertile pond to fish in, if you are going to go fish there, you almost have to take it more seriously. You have to be ready to compete for those eyeballs. And it helps to like niche down as much as possible so that you can be really known for a very specific thing rather than just being, sort of bland out there. I think the next question is kind of like, what stage are you? Because I think it impacts who you're going to invest in terms of the executive profile you want to elevate. So if you are, seed stage through maybe Series C, then it's probably most likely going to be your CEO or founder. Like they're probably going to be the person who should be out there most often, is the sort of, lightning rod for whatever your message is going to be or whatever you need to pitch out there in the market. They're the visionary. They're going to also carry the most credibility with that CEO title and in their content. If you're after Series C, you might want to start looking elsewhere in the organization, particularly somebody who looks like your ICP, has a lot of experience as your ICP. They're going to be able to kind of like walk the walk, talk the talk out there in the marketplace. Generally, we found that in the later stages, the CEO and founder just starts to become too far removed from the day-to-day, from talking to customers, from being out there and being able to speak to the pain points that they might be experiencing, and they just become too busy. I think a good CEO and founder is not that way, but just generally it ends up being that way. And so getting a kind of evangelist role going a little bit earlier on and investing in that person could be fruitful. And again, I come back to like, I think everybody should be doing it. So I think like ideally you're kind of both doing, both a CEO and potentially like an evangelist type role.
Okay. Do you worry if the person leaves? That's an aside, but you can answer it anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's always a risk with this.
Yeah.
I think that's another reason to think about differentiation of the voice. I mean, the CEO and founder is less likely to leave. So again, that's like less risky to go with them. But if you can tap an executive or two around them, underneath them, to start elevating them, I think that's great. Yes, you will be putting resources into helping, an asset that they would carry with them should they leave the company. I think that just generally, the return that you see investing in individuals on these social platforms over the kind of company accounts or the company pages, particularly on LinkedIn, makes it well worth it.
Yeah, and like if you think about it, every skill that you learn in a job, well, most of them are applicable to other jobs, and it's talent and experience that the person brings with them. So it's not really that different, except there's actual, followers tied to it. But it's kind of the same thing. It's just a skill that's transferable, and in this case, an audience that's transferable for the person, and should be a huge perk for them working there.
As what we've talked about now, it's like, is your ICP on LinkedIn? Then what stage are you? Now that you've kind of oriented to those questions and you're ready to kind of actually select, is it going to be the CEO? Is it going to be this other person? I would say there's like 3 big criteria that we look at if somebody's going to be set up for success on this motion. One is credibility and experience. And experience as the ICP, I should say. Because if you think about when you come across a piece of content on social media, the first thing you think of, whether subliminally or explicitly, is why the hell should I listen to this person, right? Like that's kind of always the thing that you need to get past. And so you need a good answer for that. And you need somebody who's well-positioned to have a good answer for that. So credibility as an executive, have they started and sold companies before? How many years have they been in the industry? Can they talk about, multi-year or decade cycles of evolution across the problems that your ICP are dealing with, or the kind of strategies and evolution of the industry? Can they speak directly to the experience of your ICP, their pain points? Have they walked the walk? That sort of thing. I think that's very, very important. And if you don't have the credibility or you're weak on it, there are things you can do. Like, for example, I think doing a podcast or having some sort of program where you're getting guests involved helps you borrow some of that experience. And there's other things you can kind of do to offset that. But I think the credibility piece is a very, very important one to be conscious of. The second thing would be having access. And so this means like access to movers and shakers within the industry, having access to customers and those conversations, having access to unique data sets and being able to draw insights from it. If you think about it, the first couple months of this motion, as long as the executive's into it, it's going to flow pretty easily. Like they're going to have things to say. They're going to get all of those hot takes out. In month 3, 4, 5, it becomes a lot harder to kind of dig for content, and you want to be ready and set up to have systems in place that they're able to pull content
Come
from.
up with stuff. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think it's really helpful to think about your executive as a journalist in their industry, and they're kind of like the new version of like a trade magazine or publication that reporting out on what's going on in your industry. So if they are having interesting backroom conversations that then they can create a piece of content about and share about, like, hey, I'm hearing this thing from other people in the industry. This seems to be a problem that's coming up. Here's how I think we should deal with it. That's going to be very interesting. If you can report out, hey, I talked to a customer last week and they were dealing with this problem and they solved it in this way, and here's the playbook that you can steal to go do it because you, ICP audience, look exactly like they do, then great. So you want to have, somebody who has these access points because they're going to have an interesting thing to report on. They're going to be an interesting journalist for your audience.
Yeah, I like that it's the modern trade magazine. It certainly looks a lot different, but that's exactly kind of what it has replaced. I think one of my professors told me in business school, there's like 3 main ways to contribute to a conversation, just in general, in a meeting, whatever it might be, on LinkedIn, wherever it is. And one is like you can make a net new point. So you can make that hot take or have an original thought. And one is that you can react to someone else's thought. So you're just, chiming back in. And the third is that you can actually like round up or synthesize other people's points. And ideally, I think as someone who's out there on social media or trying to be a quote influencer you're good at all three. You can make the original points, you can reply and respond to other people, and you can synthesize. But I think starting as a synthesizer to get your feet wet and having these great conversations and summarizing them is a good place to start. So I think about this a lot, actually, like all the ways you can kind of contribute to any kind of discussion.
That's a really, really good framework. I like that a lot. And yeah, you're right. That's a great way to get people's feet wet. I mean, it's also a great way to bolster credibility if you're weak on that point. I mean, I'll take myself as an example here. I publish out on LinkedIn mostly so that I can do the thing that we do, so that I can understand what our customers are really going through. But I don't have, I'm a marketing agency trying to sell to VPs of marketing and potentially like a CEO founder kind of role. I don't have experience with any of that, right? I have a ton of experience in social media and in content production. I don't have experience being a B2B marketer, but having a podcast and a guest series where I've been able to talk to and learn from folks like yourself and learn about B2B marketing and basically take those ideas and those insights and synthesize them and share them out and be a curator has been great in being able to help, offset my lack of credibility in that area and give me more things and ideas to talk about. I think learning in public is like a really big thing and a big way to kind of think about this.
Yeah. Some of my best posts on LinkedIn are like questions that I ask. Like, what do you think about this? I do that like before I do a newsletter. Typically, I pre-ask a question that's going to help me write it. And those are some of my best ones because they get engagement. So
yeah,
I'll
interesting.
say like, I mean, this is just a simple example, but you could say something like, what are the tools you use for X? And that's going to help me actually know what people are using, but people are going to respond. Or a question like, how are you approaching X topic? And it works really well.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I would put a word of caution for just on the curation point. I think a mistake some teams make is that they take that point a little bit too literally, where it's like here's a list of the top 5 podcast episodes from this week, and then it's just like a list of other things to read, and it's like that's not going to do very well.
Or like, here are my top 5 favorite whatever from these people. Yeah, that gets old so fast. I mean, you've got to be thoughtfully curating and not just making lists. Yes, that's a good point.
Itemize it. So it's like take one idea and like write a whole post on that one idea and make it about that, rather than trying to draw everything up. The last criteria point that we look for, and one that you already brought up, is buy-in. Like the executive needs to be ready and willing and excited to do this. They're going to put themselves out there. They're going to be vulnerable. Ideally, they're going to shake things up a little bit. They're going to stir the pot. They're going to be a little bit controversial. They might piss some people off. I mean, if you're not pissing off a small portion of your audience, you're probably not like
doing good marketing,
doing enough. Like social media is a very black and white space. You have to have very clear cut things. There's no nuance. There's no like sometimes or like oftentimes. It's like, no, it is or it is not. And sometimes that's a little hard for executives to get their head around and be comfortable with. And so you have to have somebody who's really ready to treat it as a game, as a sport that they're ready to go out and play. They also have to be ready to spend time engaging. And this is something that we really hammer through with our clients.
Such a problem.
We'll do a lot for them. We'll help them compose. We'll help them ghostwrite. We'll help them create content. And that's all great. We can do the writing, but we can't go out there and then engage with the audience with all of these ideas and to kind of stir up extra thought in the comments. So when you are posing a question out to your audience and then people are responding, like I'm sure you're going in and responding to those comments and continuing the conversation. You're going on to guests like other people on LinkedIn, like their posts, you're commenting there. There's like a lot of takes a ton of time, and there's a lot of activity. You can't just give a presentation at the conference and then like ditch the conference. Like you got to show up and mingle. You got to mingle with people, say hi. Right.
That part takes longer. That part's harder than the talk. The showing up and mingling is harder than the talk that you're going to give, because you've probably given the talk before. At least for me, like generating the net new content and things that I post is not the hard part. in terms of time. It's like for me, it's all the follow-up and all of the engagement, but
Yeah.
maybe that's just 'cause
but
I've been doing it for a
LinkedIn
while.
loves the engagement. They love to see it, and they're going to reward
They
you
do.
for it. So if you post and ghost, that is not going to be a
Post
good
and
recipe for
ghost.
success. Do not post and ghost. And you know, lastly, you just got to be excited about it. They got to come ready with ideas. They got to come like into those, you know, calls or into the Slack group, whatever you have set up to help generate the content. They have to, hey, I just had this great idea on the ride into work. Like, I think there's a post here. Like, let's talk about it. They have to be thinking in content and be excited about it.
So that's the criteria that you use. How do you do it? Because everybody seems to want to do this these days. And then when it comes to actually doing it, they want to cut corners, not actually have to do it, not engage. Like, yeah, how do you all manage this?
We try to set up a system for the thought leader that all they have to do is check off all the boxes that I just said and like be into it and bought in, and then come with ideas and come with thinking. And we will help execute the rest like for them. And I think that's like a really healthy way to do it, because what can bog people down is the blank page, the dread of the blank page, the pressing publish on LinkedIn is like a very nerve-wracking thing. Keeping track of when you need to publish and making sure there's time in the day to publish, and then, you know, crafting up the writing and massage. That can all be like a big tax on an executive who has a lot going on, but might have like really great ideas. So our system, and again, I think that marketing teams can copy this as well. And internal marketing teams can set this up if they have the resources for it. But generally, the 3 buckets that we try to set an executive up with is number 1, strategy, number 2, content production, and number 3, engagement, audience engagement. And so in that first bucket, we are really setting up the content strategy. We are figuring out who exactly is the target audience. What are their pain points? What do they need to believe in order to buy? What are their alternatives? All the normal kind of marketing positioning stuff, coupled with who is the thought leader? What are their opinions? What is their point of view? What's their experience? What do they think about the market? Where do they think everything's going? And then try to line all of that up into a few clear messaging points that can be repeated over and over that line both of those things up. So that ideally, when they're out there on their megaphone, everything they're saying is from their own heart, part of their experience, part of what they believe, but it also happens to gather the right people for their business, right? We'll also overhaul their LinkedIn profile. That's a really big thing to make sure it's converting like a landing page, not a resume. Because if you're driving a bunch of traffic to your post, the first place people are going to go to is that profile. And you want to make sure that you're routing that traffic accordingly and giving them context as to like what this person is, who they do, what your company
and why
does.
they're credible. Yeah.
And why they're credible. Yeah. Why they're credible is a big thing. It's a good point. And then the second bucket is the content production piece. And we typically engage in one of 2 tiers. There's either a one-on-one interview with a content strategist and writer who we couple with the executive. This person should, like, usually we'll look for like journalism experience for this person, like not necessarily typical B2B copywriting experience. And generally that's 1 hour once a month, but I think a bi-weekly cadence can also be nice. I also highly recommend a Slack channel that you encourage the thought leader to be in. I think ideally a lot of like 50% of the content creation should or can be async through voice notes and Slacks and off the cuff things. Cause those ideas that they have in the middle of the day, or they just got out of an interesting meeting, that's going to be the real gold. We also engage on a tier of, actually engaging a guest in some sort of podcast or webinar, or I honestly don't really care what the format of the content is. It just matters that there's a third party involved. Number 1, because they provide more insight and they can add to the pot of raw material to work from. Number 2, because they add a lot of cross network effects if they go and publish to their audience.
Distribution,
right?
yeah, for
distribution. Sure. And number 3, because it can be a good prospecting tool. You can use that guest slot strategically to bring on someone from a sales deal that's stalled.
ABM strategy for sure.
ABM, exactly. And then we'll also take the keys to the executive's account and actually publish for them. I think that's a very important piece of this, because the number 1 best practice on social is to publish on social. And so if you give them the content and you expect them to publish it, the executive will not publish it. So take the keys to their account and actually publish it for them. You can tell them when they're publishing so they can still go on and comment.
This is a highly specific question, but it comes up all the time. You get their LinkedIn logins. Like
Yes.
you're literally getting their LinkedIn, because people are like, what can I use to get around this and not get in? And it's like, you can't. You just got to get their login.
You got to get their login. You can use some scheduling software. Shout out Assembly, which is very good. That's what we use. But you still need the login to log in to that software. So you will need it. You'll need the two-factor authentication. Yeah. The final bucket is audience engagement. So, after the publishing happens, I don't believe that that's when the work stops. Like, you really need to have some sort of system to capture all the engagement that's happening from that audience. So what we happen to do is we keep track of every single post that the executive publishes, along with every single post that the guest publishes. And we keep track of that, and we keep track of every single like that they get, every single person who engages with their content. And we feed that back to them as a list of leads or signal or whatever. And then we'll hook that up to connection messages, or connection campaigns and messaging campaigns within LinkedIn. So if you like one of my posts, Emily, I can click a button and say, hey, Emily, thanks for liking my post. Would love to connect sometime, and have a message sequence. You need to have some sort of engagement on the audience, because the money is in the follow-up. So you can start to, build awareness, but you want to make sure that you're actually starting relationships in the DMs.
Love that. The money's in the follow-up. That's super helpful. Are you also commenting back as them?
No.
Okay. So they have to do that.
We will not do that, because I think the comments need to be real time, and they need to be interesting add-ons from the founder's mind. And the idea of us writing those and then getting them approved through some sort of approval system and having it being real time is just not going to work. Yeah.
So you said you're doing the posting. Are you blocking off 30 minutes after for them to do that? Because the first hour of engagement matters so much. Like, how are they, or does it vary? Because this is another question that people ask me all the time. Very specific. How do we block off time? I'm like, I don't know. Ask your founder what works the best for them. But
yeah, I don't know how to answer that. We actually don't even block it off for them. We just make sure that they know what time it's posting. And I don't know what they do, but I know they're commenting there, so they must have figured it out.
They must have figured it out, because that's the thing. It's like so hard to get this in their schedule.
Well, it helps that a best practice of LinkedIn is to post at a consistent time and a consistent day. So ideally, it's like, okay, it's going to be 10:30 a.m. Eastern every Tuesday and Thursday, and the founder knows to block off 10:30 to 11 or whatever.
One last question to close us out. Do you ever think it makes sense if someone has literally no presence whatsoever on LinkedIn, barely use it, a few hundred connections? Have you ever taken or seen that taken from, 300 connections to 20,000 plus followers? Do you ever see that?
I'll tell you, we're trying with someone right now, so I'll let you know in 6 to 12 months. But I think the question is,
season 5 of the podcast, you'll let me know.
Yeah, exactly. Do they have the credibility to do it? Right. Like if they're kind of like an absolute stud, and they've just been pretty lazy with their LinkedIn, but they're kind of a matchbox ready to light, then sure, I think that could definitely work. But if they don't have much credibility, if they don't have much expertise, if there's no reason why someone would want to listen to them, then it's going to be a pretty
So why is it like that is the thing to figure out. Why have they not done it? I think is the thing to get to there.
Yeah.
Well, great. This was super helpful and brings me a lot to go back to Jenny and Devin with for us to finish our conversation. So thanks for being our phone a friend in the middle of this episode. First time we've done it, but it was great and super helpful. So I really appreciate you.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Hey, Jenny. Hey, Devin. We're back. I have had a conversation with Peter in the meantime, and it was really helpful. I think a lot of what he said aligns with what we were saying, just around how to decide if a founder should really be investing in this, or a company should be investing in this, and also give us a lot of tactical advice for how to make this happen. Love what he said about recording with founders like taking an hour every month recording with founders, because one, that can help you generate a lot of ideas and generate text from the transcripts, but two, you can actually just use those videos on social. So that's a great way to get a lot of bang for your buck off of that hour. Also love what he said about the Slack channel, just having a Slack channel where founders feel like a low bar for dumping their ideas and some of their drafts as they think of them. Were there any things that he said that you all kind of like don't know if you agree with?
He basically said kind of everyone should be building their personal brand, right? And like, I don't know if that's totally true. I mean, well, I'm only doing this podcast to build my own personal brand, so
yeah, that's why
maybe I do agree with it, but yeah, I don't think that every founder needs to do this. I mean, this is sort of our hot take from the beginning, right? Only do it if you have clear goals, if you have a good message, audience, channel fit, etc. But I guess, yeah, ironically, here I am building my personal brand.
I'm just doing this for the swag and the milk talk.
All right. So I don't know that every founder should be spending time building a personal brand. And I definitely don't think every executive should either. I think it really depends on, to Jenny's point, is it going to like help you achieve the goals that you're set overall? Is it going to help you drive those perceptions forward? Like, let's go back to the foundational things that I always say you need to look at to make decisions. What are your overall goals? What are the perceptions and stories you're trying to tell? Who is your audience? Where are they? And then there's a million things you can do in marketing. So you have to prioritize.
One thing I really did agree with that he said was the don't post and ghost thing. I think engagement is super important on these channels.
I'm gonna have to steal Peter's phrase, don't post and ghost, and make it a framework. Tactically speaking, the engagement in the first hour on LinkedIn, you commenting back to any comments that come in, is what matters the most for getting impressions and reach. And so you've got to be there. And that is perhaps, as I think I said to Peter, the hardest thing to get a founder to do, because it's not like just post this. It's like you have to go back and do it. And it's somewhat, I think, don't post or ghost really lends itself to a conversation about ghost writing, because while it might be easy to have the post ghost written for the founder or the executive, it's very difficult to have every individual comment ghost written by someone else. It becomes really obvious. And so that part is hard, but I would love to get your takes on to ghostwrite or not to ghostwrite.
Well, Jenny might disagree with this since she was a ghostwriter earlier in her career or has done some ghostwriting. I've done some ghostwriting too, actually, but my take is no, if you can avoid it. And again, I think this is why it's important to make sure your exec thought leader really has energy around this. I think if you can avoid ghostwriting, you'll just end up with a more authentic sounding voice. And I think authenticity is really important in breaking through on these channels as well. Like, let's be honest, social channels are super saturated these days. And so I think having a unique voice, just being like genuine and unfiltered is so important. And I think we all would say that and nod our heads and be like, yeah, totally. But then if you're doing it with a ghostwriter, you are literally filtering the thought leader's thoughts through like another voice. So sometimes, at a certain scale, this probably becomes impractical, but I think insofar as possible, and at least to start, like try to have the founder or CEO or exec, whoever, do it themselves.
And even if they're, again, like dictating to in a video in like a session in Riverside or something like that, and then using their words, it doesn't have to be that they're like polishing and finalizing the post, but the more it can be in their words.
Yeah.
Really quickly, and then I want to hear if Jenny agrees or disagrees with this. Jenny, ghostwriter or not, you've been a ghostwriter. Jenny Ty, content doula and ghostwriter, also head of content at Banta.
I'm biased, but yes, you should have a ghostwriter involved, especially if your founder or exec is really busy with a bunch of other things because they have day jobs being the founder of a company, or they're not, or, they maybe aren't confident in their own writing skills. That said, they still need to be very involved. And having been a ghostwriter myself, you have to find someone who's skilled and can still capture their voice, not water down their ideas, and make sure that they are, kind of presenting those thoughts, that's true to kind of, the founder's vision.
All right. So let's get back into the brass tacks here. Peter mentioned some things that they do to work with executives. What have you seen done that works to wrangle the executive or make this possible? Like, what do you do to make this possible? The execution here is really hard.
So Peter talked a little bit about this, but I think getting a regular, just, call it an intake interview meeting on the calendar, whether that's monthly or quarterly, you use that to basically do, align on some high level themes, ask targeted questions that will get you kind of good raw source material for the posts you want to create. And then, use that, get the transcripts, turn that into all the different types of content that you want to distribute. So I think just, building a consistent rhythm around, that monthly kind of interview to get those raw thoughts from your founder exec is really valuable.
Awesome. Devin, anything else? I know Mercury, you don't have to go too much into it, but I know Mercury's founder is a little bit of an influencer.
Yeah, I think what's worked well is he shares a lot of like building in public, lessons learned, both wins and failures. I think very important, again, for that founder audience that is trying new things and, pushing the envelope. I think hearing about not just the good stuff and the wins, but also kind of the losses or the stumbles, I think is, again, kind of makes it all feel a lot more real and authentic and valuable to people. Help your founders also like figure out what they're comfortable with in terms of giving a little bit of a glimpse into who they are outside of work. I think sometimes these little personal insights or tidbits can be kind of like a nice pattern interrupt from the kind of stuff we usually see on LinkedIn. And again, really kind of humanize and show that there's this real person behind this. And it's not just a face that is, instead of coming from the company handle, you're posting what you would have posted from the company handle through the person's handle.
So there's the building in public thing is like, it is a huge thing. And a lot of founders try it. I think it makes sense for some founders, but for other founders, I think it's a total waste of time. And I think the point there is not that Amada and Mercury is doing it wrong. It's that his audience, a lot of the early users and a lot of the SMBs that use Mercury, they're also building businesses. And it's the CEOs and finance teams that are making these decisions about what financial tools to use. And so it makes a lot of sense, but it does not make sense for every founder to write about how they're building what they're building. And like, I think that's like a default thing that people do. They're like, I'll talk about entrepreneurship. And it doesn't make sense in a lot of situations. Unless you're maybe very early on and trying to use it to like, meet other founders and meet investors and things like that. But as you scale and you're really trying to speak with your audience, it might not make sense. And it might have to change over time as you scale too, which was one of Peter's points. Kind of what you do early on is different from what you do later on. So
agreed. And like at Anrock, as a counterpoint, like we elevated our head of finance quite a bit because we're talking to finance leaders and they're maybe kind of interested in company building, but they're really interested in company operations and company finance. And so that was the right person to speak to those topics. And, he talked sometimes about how we did things at Anrock, but he also just pulled on his other, experience and expertise in that function.
I would love to kind of summarize some of our overall tips. So I think the takeaways here are making your founder or you're an executive a thought leader, whether on LinkedIn or a combination of channels, takes a lot of effort. It's not super controllable. It's going to take time. So don't go into it thinking it's going to be easy because if you don't spend the right amount of time doing it, it is going to be a total waste of time. It's not something that you can really half-ass, I don't think. If you just post once every 2 weeks, it's not going to work. That's not how the algorithm works. You have to post a couple of times a week and you have to be consistent and you have to engage right after. You can't post and ghost. You can't post and ghost, meaning like in the first hour, the first 18 hours after a post. And you definitely can't post and ghost, meaning like post and then not post for 3 weeks and then try to post again and wondering why your engagement's not up. I think there's also a point here that when you're posting on LinkedIn, it's not just about the words. It's about the videos. It's about the data. It's about the images that you use. It's about pulling other people in that can help you expand your distribution. And then as a marketing team, manage all of the logistics around that to make it easier for the founder to do this.
I think, just huge +1 to authenticity and knowing your audience. So like talk about what you know, talk about, what your audience cares about. And then I think if you can tap into that sweet spot where those two pieces overlap, that's usually where you'll find gold.
I'm ready to play some games. What about you?
Let's do it.
Meet our partner, Tofu. I think of Tofu as the command center for your marketing campaigns. Tofu understands your company's brand, messaging, personas, target industries, and accounts. It then helps with every type of campaign, from demand generation, ABM, outbound prospecting, to nurture and cross-sell campaigns. It helps from the start with enrichment and research, through to sending the right personalized content, and finally by pushing everything to the right channels for you. With Tofu, you can cut back on the MarTech stack bloat without needing to use 27 different tools. Visit tofuhq.com and mention MKT1 to get 10% off the Tofu starter package. That's tofuhq.com. So we're going to do a pregame, and then we're going to do our real game, Best Marketer. So the pregame is, as Peter said, it's important to know if your audience is even on LinkedIn. The rules are Price is Right style, which means I want a number without going over for you to guess how many people fall into these roles on LinkedIn based on a simple search. Again, Price is Right style. Do not go over. VP of Marketing, United States of America. Any industry.
VPs of marketing are definitely on LinkedIn, so this is going to be a high one, but I have no idea of like scale.
What are you guessing?
Like 200,000.
Jenny.
I'm going to say 250,000.
Okay, well, the good news is that neither one of you went over. The bad news is that you are orders of magnitude off. You are off by about
2 million. 2 million.
You're off by 3x. It's 776,000 VPs of marketing. Not all marketers, but just in that role.
That actually, that makes me feel good. There are more marketing leaders
so I mean,
in
there's
the US than I thought there were.
Yeah, if you're going after senior marketing leaders, that doesn't include the directors, the CMOs, the SVPs, all that stuff. All right, we've been talking about finance leaders a little bit. Is it worthwhile to go after finance leaders? If you're going after just the CFOs, this is an enterprise play. CFOs in software tech in the United States, what do you think? Hint, it's lower than the numbers we've had so far. But don't go over.
50,000.
Jenny Ty, what you got?
Devin used to work in this space, and I feel like she probably knows this answer. Let's say 51,000.
That is so
I like
unfair.
the way you're playing. I like the way you're playing. All right,
Okay,
Jenny
you can
will
go first next time.
She will go first next time. That's only fair. You both lost again, so I guess that means I won. It's 29,000. 29,000. This isn't
We
math.
are really bad at this.
The next one, playing into the fact that my wife who works in healthcare is not on LinkedIn. I mean, there's a profile, but she doesn't use it. How many nurse practitioners, not a nurse practitioner, an NP, and I should mention an NP that listed out the whole word and didn't just say NP, are there in the United States? If that changes your answer, which I'm sure you had an answer and you adjusted it because of that fact.
Mm-hmm.
How many do you think they are on LinkedIn?
I'm going first, right?
Yeah. Tough one. Tough one to go first.
I'm going to say 675,000. Final answer.
Damn.
I think it's less than that, but I think it's more than we would think, because I think there are a lot of nurse practitioners in the world,
There
and
are.
not a big percent, or in the United States rather, and not a big percentage of them are necessarily on LinkedIn. But because there are so
I
many,
wonder if is that a US specific title? I think it probably is. It's kind of a specific thing. Anyway, that doesn't matter because I filtered it to the US.
I'm going to go with 350,000.
Devin is definitely closer and not that far off, but you're both over. But I'm going to give you a second chance. Jenny's going to go first again. That's only fair. Devin was closer. You're both over. Let's go again.
325,000.
275,000.
No, Devin, in this situation, you say $1.
$1. One person. One nurse practitioner.
One person. Yeah, come on. Have you not seen the show?
Yeah.
Devin wins.
Sorry.
Devin wins. It's 265,000 nurse practitioners in the U.S. Honestly,
I
lot
would have
more than I
lost
thought.
too. I would have
A
lost
lot
with my
more.
original
I know. You both would have lost again, so I was trying to help. There are more. All of this is just fun and games. But really, the point of all of this is to say that you should know your audience and know how many are in them, not just in your TAM overall, not just how many companies there are, but how many are actually on LinkedIn versus other platforms. And there are ways to do this that are more sophisticated than the way I did it with the basic LinkedIn search this morning. So let's do actually, that was the pregame. Can you imagine how good the game is?
I hope we're better at the real game than we
I'm
were at the
ready.
pregame.
All right. Now it's time for Best Marketer, where I quiz my co-hosts. I would like you to craft the most ridiculous, absurd, influencer style headline for your own LinkedIn. You are becoming an influencer. It doesn't have to be in marketing. It doesn't have to be in startup world. It can be whatever. You are making a headline. But before we do it, let me give some examples of wild and crazy headlines. I wish you could see the picture that goes along with this one, but I'm not going to show it because I want to keep these people anonymous because I am shaming them on my podcast. This person's is helping companies build movements to escape from the sea of sameness and revenue creators be cured of the sameness syndrome. So apparently there's a sea of sameness and a sameness syndrome. Co-founder,
Wait, that's the same line.
Co-founder at X and Y, it says the names. Line, straight line thingy. I don't know what that's called. Line break thing. 2 exits. That's 1. Inspiration. Your job is to outdo these people. This next person is advisor, line thing, thought leader, line thing, CEO, line thing, MD, line thing, BOD, line thing, author, line thing, keynote speaker, line thing, capital readiness, line thing, restructuring, line, global industry agnostic advisor, line, manufacturing, line, distribution, line, technologies, line, mentor, line, USN submarine veteran.
Really just
This
rolls
next
off the
one
tongue.
Takes a different approach. Finger down emoji. 47-page deck that will change your marketing. That's the whole headline. And I'll have you note that this person that I'm talking about has millions of followers.
I like the ones where they tell you how much money their agency makes in the LinkedIn headline.
Mm-hmm.
That's something.
Yeah, mm-hmm. That's really something. I don't have one of those. I have one more example. This one's going to start off normal and it quickly gets weird. Marketer. Great. Backslash. So, not a line thing, backslash. Is that what it's called? Sounds weird. Backslash. Internet plumber. / company builder. Internet plumber.
What is an internet plumber?
I don't know. What is your ridiculous influencer title, headline? And reminder, this is a what not to do segment of the show.
I've thought about this, so I can go first.
Oh, cool.
I'm just gonna real-time riff.
You thought about this because at the beginning of our recording, I told you this was the game, or because you've thought about this every day of your life?
Just for today.
Oh, okay, cool.
Okay, here we go. Marketer. Line thing again.
What?
Innovating here. Podcast co-host. Line thing. Content doula. Line thing. Knowledge worker. Line thing. Dog mom, because of course.
Thought leisurer.
Line thing. And then last thing is aspiring lady of leisure.
Ooh, spelled correctly? Your hat from
with the special
the other day when we
spelling.
recorded.
Yes.
Okay.
Done.
Okay.
Final answer.
I love that you added the line things and then you said you doubled down. You literally doubled down.
I'm like,
You
I
put
love the
double
line thing so much. We're doing double line things.
Line thing. Devin, can you top it? That's wow, Jenny, you have so many things you can influence on. The supply and the demand is there. You are ripe and ready to go. Your personal audience doesn't really match with the audience of the company you work at, which is Vanta, but I think you should lean in. I think it's time to influence.
Building that personal brand.
The time is now, Jenny.
One amendment. Milk emoji.
Mm-hmm. Wholesome. That indicates to me that you're wholesome and strong.
So I'm going to do some alliteration And now that I think about it, I can bring
So-
milk into the picture too.
Are you gonna do alliteration and line things, or just alliteration? We'll see. Let's see what you got.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll also start with marketer. Dot thing.
What?
You know the dot thing where you can put a dot between. It's not a period, but it's
right
like
in the
oh,
middle.
a dot in the
Yes.
middle.
What's
Yeah.
How do you do
So
that?
just pattern interrupt, line things everywhere. Dot thing.
Is it option 8? I think it might be option 8, or is that a bullet? I don't know.
That's a star, isn't it? No. Never mind.
No, that's shift
No, it's
8,
shift
Jenny.
8, yeah.
Marketer, Midwesterner, mathemagician,
Yes.
manipulator of minds.
That reminds me. I
enthusiast.
like the milk enthusiast. None of us drink milk, for the record. I mean, I don't drink milk. I drink almond milk in my cereal, which is my dinner most nights of the week. You both took a similar tactic, but Jenny added in the double line thing, and Devin added in the alliteration and the milk reference. So I'm gonna give this to Devin. Well, that's all we have today. It's so nice to be with these budding influencers and also these women who are helping people become influencers every day through their work at Vanta and Mercury.
I like it.
Thanks, Jenny and Devin, for helping save us from the sea of sameness with everything you do. I appreciate you being here and doing this marketing plumbing work with me.
Thanks, Creams.
Say something, Jenny.